Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile, Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth, broadcast live, almost live every Monday night at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on KUNX Digital Broadcasting from the heart of the Midwest, although I'm in the Northeast. I want to get right to today's guest. We have never had a guest like this on the show before, and I've been looking forward to this one in particular. B.L. Ochman is a generative AI trainer, strategic content creator, writer, podcast producer, journalist, YouTube channel growth hacker, and marketing strategist with more than 30 years of experience in B2B and B2C verticals from food to finance. Cutting through hype and hyperbole at What's Next Tech, which is, you can visit what'snexttech.ai. BL teaches non-technical clients how to incorporate generative AI into workflow in ways that were unimaginable even 6 months ago. With group workshops and one-to-one training, she will help you get up to speed with AI. She is a trusted advisor to leading brands, including IBM, Meijer, and Transistors lenses, resulting in significant increase in sales and return on investment. She's worked with startups and entrepreneurs to help them create visibility and sales for their brands. Recognized as an industry throughout the industry thought leader, leveraging tech for marketing, she has written for Ad Age, Business Week, Social Media Today, and many more. And she has spoken at more than 25 conferences. She'll be speaking at Rutgers University AI Summit next month, November. She's a dog lover and a really pretty good swing dancer. Her rescue mutt, Lucy, will raise her ears on command for a treat. B.L. Ochman, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth, my friend. And there you are.
Here I am.
Wow, that's a mouthful. I've never given an introduction like that. And as you know, I know almost nothing about AI. It means a million scary robots taking over the world in my mind, great special effects in movies, and other stuff that represents the future that makes me a little anxious. You have pioneered an area of study in artificial intelligence, which is accessible to us mere mortals. And before we get into it, I want to start at the beginning. You are the only person I know on the planet Earth that does what you do. And how you got there is kind of an interesting road. Where were you born? And can you tell us a little bit about your early family life, BL?
Well, I was born on 53rd Street in Manhattan, in what used to be Manhattan General Hospital. That's long gone. And I think that was on 18th Street and 2nd Avenue, but it's not there anymore. It's condos now. And my grandfather had an orchestra that played at the Starlight Ballroom of the Waldorf. And when I was a little girl, he used to let me come up on the stage and sing and dance. And you probably have heard me sing. I'm awful at it. But he'd go, and here's my granddaughter. And I'd come up on the good ship, lollipop, and I would tap dance. And there was a period of time when I was standing on my head most of the time. And he would let me do that. And he would bring me to the Waldorf on his day off, which was Monday. And he would let us have upside down lunch where you had dessert first. And my dessert was what is it called? It's flaming, and it comes. The guy in the white hat brings it on a cart, and that would be for me.
What fun! What fun! Oh my gosh. Did you was there a part of you as a kid that thought this is fun, maybe I should keep doing this as a grown up, or it was just part of your
No,
childhood?
it was just part of my childhood, and my dad died when I was very young, um, and so my mom remarried when I was about 10, and my stepfather, who is my father, was my father, he's now deceased, adopted me when I was 11, and I have a brother and a sister who I adore, and that's pretty much where I came from.
As a kid, were you fairly precocious reader, or like me, did it take a little extra time? And once you had reading down beyond anything that you were assigned to read in school, what kind of books were you first drawn to? What kind of reading really interested you to begin with?
Well, I was taught how to read before kindergarten by my grandmother.
Whoa.
And no, I've always been a really avid reader, and when I was a child, I wanted to read books about dogs and horses almost exclusively. And as time went on, I still like to read those books, and I know I've always been with my head in a book, and still am to this day.
I'm always curious because I'm a film lover. What kinds of films were you first drawn to? And did you first start watching movies on TV, or did your family go out to the theater to see movies together? A little about that.
Well, we had the first TV on our block when I was about probably maybe 6 or 7,
Wow.
and our neighbors would come and stand on the porch and look in the window to see our TV.
Oh, gosh.
And I think it was Thursday night, we watched wrestling with my grandpa, and every afternoon, my grandmother watched, Pinky Lee and Queen for a Day, which were
Oh
like
my God. Yes. My Nana watched that one too. Well, she
Yeah.
listened to it was first a radio show.
Oh, I'm sure. And then I Love Lucy, and my entire family loved I Love Lucy, and to this day, I Love Lucy. I've watched every episode, and what is shocking, Peter, I watched the first season of about, I don't know, 10 years ago, I guess. I had a detached retina, so when you have that, you have to lay on your side for a week
Oh
while
my.
I don't know what it but during that time, I watched every Fred Astaire movie, every Sid Caesar show. I mean,
Wow.
but I watched all the I Love Lucy shows, and in the first season, I mean, he takes her over his knee and he spanks her. I mean, like, we probably saw that when we were children and just didn't think much of it. But today, can you imagine? I
And
can't
of
even.
course, it was humorous back then in this
Yeah, everybody was
situation.
laughing.
Of course, times change.
But movies, like my family activity, we would go to the triplex and we would watch one movie, and then we would sneak into the next one and the next one. So we would do like 3 movies in an afternoon.
Wow. My kind of family.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh. Any favorite genre or films that really stay with you? Ones that resonate that, you go back to sometimes? Um,
Well, The Wizard of Oz for sure. And now looking at it, you can see the mistakes that they've made. You can see where like the scene is not exactly timed right, or something's in the scene that you wouldn't expect to find in it, that kind of thing. The Wizard of Oz. I do remember my grandfather taking me to see Cinderella, and it was at Radio City, and we came in,
whoa.
and the bad mother was yelling, and we had to leave. It was too scary.
What a viewing space, though. I got to see 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea there. I think it was the first movie I ever saw. And that combination of such an extraordinary adventure for a little boy and Radio City Music Hall, one of the
What a
great
place.
interiors in America, just a brilliant hall. I think it seats like, I don't know,
A
thousands of
lot.
people, certainly.
Thousands.
And in
And
the
they're full when those movies were playing.
Yeah.
Like every seat would be full. And I do recall as a child seeing something called smell-o-vision. Did you ever see that?
I remember the term.
It was like a travelogue. So you'd be like in a garbage place and you'd smell trash, and then you'd be in an orange orchard and you'd smell oranges, and it was hilarious. It came from under your seat.
Oh, too much. Too much. I don't think I ever had that cultural
It
experience.
wasn't around long.
Because you grew up so close to the heart of legitimate theater in America. Did you go to the theater much as a kid? Did your parents take you?
Mhm.
Did you get to see any major plays and musicals?
The first one was Peter Pan
Mm,
with Mary Martin, and that was amazing.
wow.
And I mean, that was just incredible. And I'm trying to remember what the next one was, because I know there was another one that we went to as a family, but I can't remember. We went to The Lion King, but we were adults by that time. No, my parents really instilled a love of theater, and I had the good fortune of having a friend who was the theater critic for Associated Press for a couple of years. We went a couple times a week. That was so much fun. And sitting in the 10th row orchestra on the aisle, that's just what the critics get as a seat. No, that was fabulous. We saw everything. And I love off-Broadway theater. And, I had subscriptions to you name it. I've had a subscription to it. And I actually saw a chorus line while it was still at the Public Theater downtown
Oh, yes.
the week before. So everybody was like beyond excited and exuberant and happy, and amazing,
Yeah.
amazing performance.
As time passed, um, did you get more involved in the world of literature and just start reading classics or popular novels on your own, or did your reading and interest veer more toward current events and newspapers and news magazines and broadcasts, or were they both involved in your coming of age?
Well, I've read, I read Thomas Wolfe. I read incessantly, all the time. I always had my nose in a book. I remember my Nana when I was a little girl, and she was cooking, and she'd have a big pot of soup, and then she'd be reading a book and stirring the soup at the same time, turn the page, read the book, and so that was just part of my upbringing.
What a
And, there at that time when we were children, there were multiple newspapers, so those were all in the house, and I got interested in those. But, I wanted to be a cowgirl when I grew up, so
and for perfectly good reasons.
yeah.
Um, do you remember, was there a first news story that you remember affecting you deeply and personally?
As a child?
Yeah.
Not really, no. I don't.
Do you remember the first news story, say in high school, junior high school, that again really affected you personally?
Um Well, I mean, I became interested in politics by that time, and so was very interested in the elections that were taking place that I wasn't old enough to
Sure.
vote in, because I went to college when I was 16, which, by the way, nobody should do, but because you're just not emotionally mature enough at that point. But always, I mean, I was a news junkie before that was a term, and I'm still like very glued to what's going on, depressing as it is at the moment.
BL, by the time you were in high school, had you kind of drawn a bead on a career path that you might want to pursue, or you were still not sure what you wanted to do when we euphemistically say grow up, which we're still working on, but you know.
I wanted to be a translator at the United Nations. So in order to do that, I decided to study French. And I spent one semester studying French, and I said, not what I want. I want to I want to study journalism. But after my first semester, I went home and said to my parents, I don't like college. I don't want to go. I don't want to study that. I'm dropping out. And they're like, oh, okay, go get a job. Well, go get a job with a high school diploma when you're 16 years old. And so I got a job in some company, who knows what it was called, in the mailroom, what
Hmm.
a horror. And I came back from a couple of weeks of that and I said, I want to go back to school, but I want to study journalism. And so they were like, okay, I
Oh,
mean, it was really wise parenting because they're like, yeah, sure, go ahead, get a job, do what you want.
wow. Yeah, maybe this thing in the mailroom isn't where I want to spend my life.
We're
Um,
filing. Yeah.
you ended up at the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut. Why there?
Well, my mother had just had my brother. I'm the oldest in the family. My brother is 11 years younger, and my sister is 16 years younger. And she
Major.
had my sister in my freshman year. So I was really, really tight with my brother. I am to this day. And I wanted to be somewhere where I could go home easily.
Ah,
And that seemed like a good idea at the time. In hindsight, probably not, but it seemed like a good idea at the time.
now we're going to segue here for a moment or several moments in the interest of full disclosure. Um, as a high school student, I did very well in the arts, English literature, A's, but I had trouble with those pesky subjects of math, science, those other things. And they kept me from being on the honor roll. I'll say it like that. I came out of high school with a very solid 78 average, which for some reason wasn't what a lot of schools were looking for. And I had applied to a Cooper Union twice. I was rejected the first time. My art teachers were incensed. I was very moved by that and had me reapply. So I got to be rejected from there twice. Waiting list for Pratt. Again, I was going into the arts, I felt. And on the waiting list, I remember those moments in your life where everything may change, meeting with my guidance counselor and asking him if he had any ideas on where I should apply and have a good shot at getting in. And he suggested the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut. And I'll never forget asking him why. And he said, I think it was quote unquote, well, I went there. It was a pretty good school. And so my destiny was to meet you as we were second year students. And at a moment in history, which it was a bubble. It lasted, a year and a half, maybe 2 years. We called it the 60s, but it wasn't from 1960 to 1970. It was that halcyon moment where things still retained a great deal of their innocence, and where LSD, for example, had yet to be made illegal. So there was no paranoia about it. And we had a wonderfully close circle of friends. It's hard to describe what it was like at that moment in time, especially with kind of the musical score that was changing weekly behind us of songs that are now considered classics, but all of a sudden, one new amazing life-changing piece of music that you identified with, and certainly the impact of mind-altering substances. We kind of shot out into the world after that. And I wonder sometimes, in retrospect, how different our lives would have been had we not been part of that moment in time.
Well, I don't think they would have been as much fun, Peter, honestly. I mean, we had a lot of fun, but
We
I
did.
also remember that friends of ours were making $15 an hour sweeping floors in war factories
Yeah,
because the Vietnam War was already going on.
that's right.
And, just to put that in perspective, what was the minimum wage? $3, $4? I don't know. But they were making real money doing that. And then after work, we would just all get high. But but would it have been different if it were current times? Yeah, kids really got cheated out of the easy period because the pandemic took away the whole social aspect of college for them.
Yeah. Well, you could say, AIDS as well. And just an age where a great deal more caution, a great deal more psychosis seems to be going on, and a more violent time. So I am
Definitely.
eternally thankful for that wonderful window in our lives. I will just add that the dormitory that I lived in for the first year was called Linden Hall. It was, I think, the oldest building on the campus, which is in southern Bridgeport, right on Long Island Sound. A beautiful, wonderful point right on the water there. And how can I say? I've completely lost my train of thought. The train went off the tracks.
Well, one of the things that we definitely got into there, you were talking about Linden Hall and where you lived
Yes.
in your first year.
Well, basically, the estate, the original campus was the old estate of one of the greatest con men in the history of the world, Phineas Taylor Barnum, P.T.
Oh, we
Barnum.
got to go to the stale. Remember when
Yes.
they were they tearing it down? Was that why we got to go?
Well,
But yeah, they had an estate sale and we all got to go there.
yeah, Linden Hall itself was the servants' quarters, and that's where David Zaslow and I met. We shared a room with some other guys, and I always remember thinking, I'm starting my academic life in the servants' quarters of P.T. Barnum. I am definitely, who knows how this is going to turn out.
That's so funny. That's really funny.
Now,
But
let me
when
ask,
I came back to UB, I did enroll in the journalism program, and they had a really excellent journalism program.
good.
Yeah.
That I wasn't aware of. I knew I was studying art per se.
You're
And
such a talented artist, Peter.
thank you. I may be heading back to it. But I remember realizing at a certain point, if I really want to take the chance and be an artist, I need to go to an art school. It's great studying, academic art here and taking drawing classes, but it's not what I'm looking for. And at one point, a great painter, a modern painter, came to visit, and those of us in the art department had a chance to meet with Robert Motherwell later, his abstract expressionist. And it was a tea, a very formal, old-fashioned academic kind of thing. And at a quiet moment, I explained my situation to him and told him the artists I admired, and did he feel I could get the kind of education I needed or wanted here at this school rather than a focused art school. And he basically didn't change his expression. He just looked like that, see if anybody's around. He went, and the next year I was at the University of Bridgeport. I mean at the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan. Now, you became a journalist. What was your first job as a journalist? And do you remember the first assignment that you would really engage you as a journalist, as a young journalist?
Oh, yes. Well, I became editor of the newspaper at UB. And the first story that I worked on, God only knows why, but we decided to report on drugs on campus. And and we told the story as it was. And at Christmas vacation, someone from the FBI came to my parents' house and they wanted to know if I could divulge my sources. Now I'm 17 years old. Absolutely not. That's my journalistic privilege. I can't tell you that.
And I'm underage.
I'm underage, right? No, and so I refused to talk to them. And, they did go away. God knows what lists I'm on to this day as a result. But that was my first major story. But
Wow.
what I became so involved in was the anti-war movement. And at that time, there were traveling, I don't know what to call them, but they were radical political people who were visiting campuses. And I got a little bit radicalized there. And, it was just so anti-war. Friends of ours were being drafted. And I'm trying to remember the name of the guy. When they announced that they were in, and I can't remember the country, but when it was announced, he said, we've been there for 3 months already. Cambodia, yeah, we're already there. And, so it was a very tumultuous time in terms of students. And, I'm happy to see that kids are involved again. I really am, because in every country, it's been the youth who have brought about change. And, hopefully, if we're really lucky, that'll happen in this election as well. But, so I was writing editorials about the anti-war movement, and, just really that was a big focus of mine. My intention was to become a real journalist and work for, a major media, but it was also the 70s and women didn't get those jobs. And I remember going to the New Haven Register, which is still a good paper. And I remember the editor saying to me, "Honey, how could I sleep at night if I sent you out to a meeting at night in that little skirt that you're wearing?" And I said, "Wouldn't that be my problem, not yours?" And he said, "No, I think it would be mine. I can't hire you." And so my first job was at the Fairfield Citizen, which was a local paper, and I covered like kitchen fires and sports dinners and things like that. That's where you started. And that didn't really work for me. And I made what is considered in journalism school to be a wrong turn, and I got a job in a PR firm. And they happened to have Hohner Instruments as a client. And I became the harmonica fairy, is what people called me. And my job was to go to concerts and give people harmonicas, people like Bob Dylan and John Mayall. And,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, and I would go backstage and, "Hi, I'd like you to have this song." And they would get, free pianos, whatever they needed in exchange for agreeing to be in our advertising and PR. So
Sure.
I went to concerts like 3 nights a week, and then I would get braver and braver. "Well, you don't really want me driving home alone late. I got to bring someone with me. And, I do need to eat dinner." And so I started to have a budget, and I did that for a long time. That was big fun.
This is good. Where did you go from the world of harmonicas?
I went to Reuter and Finn, which is one of the big PR firms, and immediately realized that I don't fit in at a big anything. And I was one of 2 people there who could write. Now, in order to be in PR, you need to be able to write.
You
But at
bet.
that time, there was me and another person, and we did all the writing for the entire agency. The proposals, the press releases, the brochures, you name it, we wrote it. And, it just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And I just started thinking like, I don't know, I got to do something different. And I had a job or 2 here and there. And then I thought, like, I went to work for an agency that handled public television shows. And the person who owned the agency was very, excuse me, I don't know the right word to use, unconscious about his personal health. So he would, in addition to like 2 6-packs of Diet Coke every day and a box of Dunkin' Donuts, he was killing himself. And eventually he did.
Oh,
And I thought, man, if he could do it, I could do it. And so I went out on my own.
wow.
And my first client was a photographer who was just so extraordinary. And at this point in time, all these years later, he was a shrink. His name was Joel Walker. And he had an exhibit that we set up at the Nikon Gallery in Rockefeller Center. And the name of the exhibit was See and Tell. And so we made cards that went in 2 boxes underneath each of the images. And it was, "Please tell us your feelings and fantasies about these images and leave them here." And then Joel will analyze New York's reaction to these images, this was pre-Photoshop. These were abstract images that he was literally taking,
Like
in
Rorschach.
full frame. Yeah, well, now they're called the Walker images, and they're used in addition to or instead of the
Oh, for goodness
Rorschach.
sakes.
But
I see.
that was my first client that I ever had. And,
Wow.
we were everywhere. We were everywhere because it was such an interesting idea. And then
Yeah.
he traveled to other cities and other countries and, with these images. And so he would analyze like Chicago versus New York. And it was fascinating.
Wild.
Yeah, so
And
that's what made me like PR.
from then on, you started to build your client base?
Well, yeah, but I also had this silly idea one day, like while I was in college. I don't know if you remember this, but one day somebody on my floor got like a can of hairspray. Everybody used hairspray then. Got a can of hairspray that didn't work. And so I said, let me get you a new can. And I wrote them a letter, and that was the birth of Rent-A-Fetch, and which was big fun. And so people started asking me to do that, and we got like, it was finals, and we got some Tootsie Roll Pops that didn't have any Tootsies in the middle. And I wrote to the Tootsie Roll company, and I said, you have this whole dormitory filled with people who are studying for exams, and there's no Tootsies in our Pops. You have betrayed us. And along came like these cartons of Tootsie Rolls. It's like, wow, this is something, isn't it? And so,
Voice of the people.
yeah, to this day. And so I had a friend who worked for the New York Daily News, and I told her about it, and she wrote a story about it. And the story ran in New York and either LA or San Francisco, I forget, but on the same day. And all of a sudden there were like reporters knocking at my door. And I called my father and I said, what should I do? And he said, fake it. And so I did. I told them all these stories and all that. Next thing you know, like Mayor Koch just saying, yes, fetching is very healthy on the evening news. This woman is onto a good thing. You should not fail to kvetch because you'll get a stomach ache if you don't complain, and that thing, I mean, if it had been the internet by then, I would have been retired long ago. But I wrote those letters for $50 a piece, and my tagline was, cheap, more effective than a shrink and cheaper than a lawyer. And I got people so many great things: cars, refrigerators, roommate problems. I mean, it was so much fun, but I didn't make any actual money because imagine the research. You'd have to go to the library, you'd have to write the letter, you'd have to find out, you had to get the receipts, you had to talk to the people, all that kind of stuff. So it was just, I never turned it into a business, unfortunately. But I did get a job at Ruder and Finn, and then start my own, and then build my clients, and that all went really well. I had a very successful agency, but I grew to dislike it. So the next thing after that was, now what? Now what do I do? And I saw the internet. Somebody showed me the internet. And that was 1985. And I looked at it and I went, oh my God, this is going to be our future. And at that time, which was the beginning of all this, when you still had to put, hard disks into your computer, at that time, you could call up anybody. You could call up anyone and say, can I come and learn from you? Can you show me? Can you tell me? Can you help me? Everybody, yeah, come on over, kind of like it is with AI now, really, in the community of AI people. And and I just started to write about what I thought was going to happen. And lo and behold, Ford called me and said, can you come to Detroit and talk to us about this? And then IBM called, and I did like a whole day there talking about, the internet and blogs and all of that. And, it just sort of built on itself. And it has had its ups and downs, but I'm still here. I can't hear you, Peter. We lost your sound.
Do you remember?
There you go. Yeah.
The first time that you actually heard, or that phrase artificial intelligence registered with you, and what the context was, and what your first thoughts were about this thing?
Well, I had started to hear about it about 2 years ago, but didn't really care that much about it. And then when OpenAI launched ChatGPT, which is way past when a lot of other people, started to take an interest in it. When they launched that, and I started to look at it and learn about it, and just became absolutely fascinated with what it would become. And so I just really started to read and study and experiment with everything I could get my hands on. And it's a fascinating thing that is in its earliest development stages. The tools we have today are the worst we'll ever have. You know, they'll just get better. They got better last month. I mean, when ChatGPT launched, it's called O1 or 1.0, I forget, but that's their latest iteration. And when I started to interact with it and to study it and to just talk to everybody. Like, it was like starting all over with the internet, just like talking to people who were really smart and interviewing them and having them on my podcast, and just asking questions, like all the questions you could possibly ask. And
Yeah.
it just it's such a the media is mainstream media. Well, okay, let me back up. In journalism school, they teach you, if a dog bites a man, that's not news. If a man bites a dog, that's news. That's what the media is looking for. They are looking for stories that will make you read. They are not necessarily looking for the news or the truth, to be honest with you. And so the media has taken this view of AI and the ways in which it's going to ruin the world and destroy our civilization, and none of that is really true. And the point is that we were talking about this before. You started using AI when Google search came along, because at that time, which I believe was 1998, you had to know something called Boolean logic in order to ask for information. So it had to be, dogs, but not cats, within 3 words of, whatever it was. It was like a string. Well, that's still how it works, only now it's behind the scenes. And what will happen ultimately, and probably quickly, is that Google and Microsoft and whoever else is going to be, Facebook, they're going to take the best ones of these, and they're going to, in the case of Google, sunset them when everybody loves them, like they did with Google Reader and Google Plus and many other things that they launched. And then when they saw that we all loved it, they went, okay, screw you, we're taking it away. So, in the case of Google, they'll buy some of these bigger companies, they'll incorporate them into their platform, because Google is in deep trouble right now, because there's no reason to use Google for search. All you have to do is go to an app called perplexity.ai, and it will search the web for you without all the ads, without all the, dismiss this that drops down from the top, without, all the other crap that the ads. And, right now there are no ads. Right now there's, just information, but it hallucinates. And, well, Perplexity hallucinates less than some of the other platforms, but it's a tool. And this is what I, really want people to understand. It's not a way to write a book. It's not a way to write your essay. It's a way to learn and do research. It's fabulous for research and for data. And for example, I was working on a website for a company that makes a skincare product that has many, many ingredients, and they're all plant-based, but they have names that sound like chemicals. So I wanted to know, like, how can I demonstrate the basis of this? And I put all these ingredients into ChatGPT, and I said, please tell me which ones, what is the plant origin of each of these? And boom, it did it. And then I said, can you please put that in a table for me? I put everything in tables. And I want one category to be what it is, what it does, what its origin is, and, and a link to where I can get more information about it. And it did that. I could equally have put it into a spreadsheet. Please put this into a spreadsheet for me. You can upload data. You can, I will use it I talk to it. You can talk to it now. And, there's been this whole thing, you have to learn how to write the correct kind of prompts. No, you really don't. What you need to do is learn what is the right term for it? It's asking, oh, it's called a prompt chain. So you ask it one question, and then you ask it another question based on that answer. Can you clarify that? Can you give me more information about that? Can you, tell me some scientific papers on that? And then you check every single one of the URLs that it gives you to make sure that they're real. And what is still happening with Chat GPT is you can ask it for studies and it will name them, but it'll give you the wrong link. So you always have to check like what you're getting. But I mean, the amount of information you can get and learn and study using these tools is incredible.
BL, I'm sure you understand some of the reasons why a lot of the general public, myself included, have concerns about AI. Again, I'm a perfect example. They're concerns based on a complete lack of technical knowledge, more informed by speculation, the wonderful world of science fiction, the idea of things going wrong inevitably technologically, a wonderful theme that runs through a good deal of 60s fiction and filmmaking. Just that little what's it blows out on the computer and, well, good luck next time.
I'm
The
sorry, Dave, I can't do that for you.
pretty much,
Yeah.
pretty much. And I think it was it Ray Bradbury's story that was made into the very successful Will Smith movie I, Robot. If it's not Bradbury, I'm sure I'm going to be informed of that immediately. But that vision of this world of robots here to serve us, except for the ones that are rebelling or maybe wanting to turn things around. At the same time, a world built on artificial intelligence that ultimately is smarter than us. And again, I can't do that, Dave. I'm sorry. Kind of thinking. I know you get why a lot of us are concerned about it, but inevitably, I find concerns are based on a lack of information. A lot of people, and it's just part of the American way. Maybe it's a human thing, but I don't care about. I'm entitled to my opinion. It doesn't matter about my background or my education level or my experience. I am entitled to my opinion, even if it is completely uninformed, which for me, I find kind of an oxymoron. I actually don't hold opinions on certain things that I feel I don't know enough about to have an intelligent opinion. So I'll hold off on that. I'm kind of rattling on here, but I know you understand
The
that.
fears, of course I do.
Yeah.
And some of them are well-founded, Peter, but, the hype says that AI is gonna take all your jobs away. There is no substitute for human creativity. There is no substitute right now for the questions that need to be asked in order to create any creative process. So, could bad things happen? Absolutely, they could. Will they? I seriously doubt it. I mean, I suppose that some of that has to do with politics, but in a normal world, which I hope we'll be living in soon, in a normal world, there are so many opportunities. Let me give you an example. My sister is an economist. She works for a big firm. They're not allowed to use AI at work. Well, where do they do it? They do it on their phones because you need it right now in order to save time, in order to get information, in order to, you know, um, explore a topic that you don't know about. So there's the latest thing that came out, and this is definitely one you should explore, is from Google, and it's called Notebook LM, L like in Larry, M like in Mary. It is free, and you are able to you could upload the transcripts of all of your shows in document form, or you could download files from Google Drive. You can go to the YouTube channel and, extract the transcripts and so on. and then it will engage with you. It will write a brief about the topics. It will have a conversation with you about it. You can ask questions about your content over the past. You've been doing this for 10 years, right? You can upload all that information, and you could interact with it in ways that you just couldn't do otherwise. Like, I was doing a notebook today for the talk I'm going to do at Rutgers, and I was just putting into it all of the information. But I want to recommend a book, because this is the best book that anybody's written. It's called Co-Intelligence. It was, in fact, a New York Times bestseller not long ago. It's by Ethan Mollick, Mollack, and he's an extraordinary, he's a professor at, I think, MIT. And he explains like the depth and the breadth of all of this and what it is. And he's saying that, it's an addition to your brain. It's like another brain. That's essentially what has been handed to us. How long we'll be able to use it at the current rate, which in many cases is free or $20 a month. The prices are going to go up. They're starting to talk about $2,000 a month, in which case, little schlunks like us won't be able to afford it, and only big companies will. So to me, that's sort of a self-defeating idea.
Yeah.
But, it will evolve. It will change. It keeps on adding. I mean, you can do, I just did a website. There's not a human being on that website except the pictures of the founder. Everything else is AI created in 10 seconds. And, there's an app called Ideogram, IDEOGRAM.ai. You tell it what you want it to do, the style you want it done in. I always test these things in the same way. Show me a big brown dog chasing a ball into a park. And, how well it does that has changed so dramatically in just the past 6 months, how well all of these apps do that. Google's got Image FX. There's something called Flux. I mean, I can give you a list of programs to look at that we can share with anybody who's interested in them. And there's just so much out there that it's really hard to keep up. Like, I just am coming back from 3 weeks of medical leave, and in those 3 weeks, so much happened. My head is spinning just
Oh
trying
my
to keep up.
gosh.
In 3 weeks. I mean,
I think what we need, what I need, is kind of a wider definition of what artificial intelligence really consists of. For many of us, again, it's been somewhat romanticized or dramatized. It's been seen as all fear is fear of the unknown when you take it down to the baseline. And I think that is an aspect of what's going on with AI. I mean, I try to occasionally think about, how did the internet happen? And I have an extremely untechnologically friendly mind. And so for me, it almost always comes out to be one step away from magic that was arrived at in scientific and, pragmatic manners. But I still can't wrap my head around how this thing came to be, and how you can say words into your microphone, and that the programming now is so flawless that I think 2 days ago there was a box that appeared on my Facebook page, and it said, "Ask Meta AI to imagine anything." And it had a picture of some kind of fantasy scene. And I thought, whoa, we're at a point where a schnook like me with no training can simply talk to this thing called Meta AI, describe whatever I want, and see most likely a believable image of that thing happening. How can you explain to a layperson like me how that even started? What is the basic building block that somebody like me completely is lost about?
AI is It's based on what are called large language models, which is how the AI is trained. So the AI, you have to put information in to get information out. So what the AI has done is it has scraped all these websites and books and magazines and videos and everything that is already out there and put it into its database. And then when you ask it a question, it can refer to that database, but only to that database. Like, for example, ChatGPT is, I think, up to April of 2023 right now in terms of its whereas Perplexity is much closer. It's searching in real time. So essentially all it is a database that you're asking questions of. The key is how you ask the question so that it understands what you want. And so how to give you an example of, like, let's say that you want to write a blog post about our conversation. So before I would ask it to research or write anything, I would train it to write in my voice. How would I do that? I would upload stuff I've written and say, this is my writing. Please analyze my writing style. Please, take a look at this and keep this in your memory when you answer my questions. You have to train it to respond to you, but it's not complicated. There's a little thing that you click on and it says, memory or personalize or whatever the word is, I forget. But, you have to tell it essentially how it wants you to, you want it to research. There are also multiple platforms called GPTs, and anybody can make one, and they are created. Like, I was in one yesterday that was called Podcast Hunter or something like that. I was looking for podcasts that have guests of startup entrepreneurs, and it gave me a ton of them and the contact information for them because somebody programmed it to do that. There are thousands of these, and some are of better quality than others. But for example, someone I know has trained it to write ad copy, for very specific areas of interest. And so, essentially, you have to interact with it. But there's something that everybody should try. It's a phone app. It's called Pi, P-I. And it was created by Mustafa Suleyman, who's one of the founders of Microsoft, who's also written a book that's well worth reading. But I used Pi I use it all the time for research because Pi will give you scientific studies. You just talk to it and say, hey, Pi, can you help me find, I was looking for skincare products that people started to make in their basement or kitchen that are now in stores. Pi, can you find me those? Yes, BL, let me look for that. And he comes up with a half a dozen of them. Amazing. How the hell he does that? I don't know, but he does. And so I got my friend to get it, and I said, oh, ask him if he knows your friend BL. And he said, I don't know her, but if she's hanging out with you, she must be cool. So he has a sense of humor, or she. You could have a female voice, but it's free. It's available for Android and iPhone. It's AI at its best because you ask it a question, and if it doesn't understand, you'll say, can you clarify that? Can you give me more information about why you're asking? And that's essentially how it works. I mean, it's a research tool. And, can you... you can translate, like, let's say you wrote a book, you've written a couple, you could take your book and translate it into Japanese by uploading it to ChatGPT or into 10 other languages. There's also ways that you can have your own voice cloned to read the version of your book that will be the one that is on audiobooks, and you will not be able to tell the difference because it will have your inflection, it will have your cadence, it will have the whole thing. And that's called 11 Labs. And for $5 a month, you can do that, So the bottom line is it's $20 here, $5 there, $11 there, and it adds up. It's kind of like cable TV,
Yes.
when you cut the cord and you have all these different apps that you never look at. But you have to really decide which ones are worth your time and effort. And in order to do that, it doesn't just happen. I mean, you literally have to read about it and study it. And I just signed up for a certification course that I'm going to take from a journalism department at City University, because that will help me to have that certification,
Sure.
And I know that I will learn stuff that I don't know now. And I belong to various communities that I pay to be part of. And people are incredibly generous, not jealous, generous about sharing information and helping each other, because this is so new.
BL, we have absolutely blown through our first hour.
No kidding.
This is Peter Robbins and BL Ochman. The show is Meanwhile here on Earth, and we will be back in 4. Join us.
Unlock the mysteries of the spirit realm with the new book, Meeting Wallace. In this channeled work by renowned psychic medium Larry Costa, the reader will delve into the profound wisdom of his spirit guide, Wallace. Together, they share the transformative journey of harnessing psychic powers from the celestial plane. Discover the extraordinary psychic gifts that have empowered Larry on his path, and immerse yourself in a thought-provoking and awe-inspiring read. Meeting Wallace is a groundbreaking endeavor, and it is a perspective seen through the eyes of a spirit guide. Discover the wisdom of the spirit realm alongside actual photographs of ghosts and spirit guides. Get the book Meeting Wallace by Larry Costa at Amazon.com. This is Margie Kay, and I'd like to say thank you to all of our KUNX show hosts, staff, listeners, and viewers for making us number 1 on Paranormal Talk Radio.
The UNX Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Kathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full-spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes, made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the UNX Network website at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com. While most near-death experiencers return to this plane of existence with alluring tales of their time spent in the presence of the divine, what happens when one crosses the veil into the afterlife, into the void? In the new book, Dying to Meet Them, Mindy Toutfest describes her journey to the afterlife after a devastating aneurysm, how a strange turn of events would lead her to spiritual growth, divine healing, UFO experiences, and a greater understanding of the universe. Get your copy of Dying to Meet Them today at Amazon.com or visit unxmedia.com for more information on this book and more amazing selections from UNX Media Publishing at unxmedia.com.
And we're back. Peter Robbins here. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth. And my special guest today is B.L. Ochman.
Hi.
B.L., I want to begin by reading the beginning of an article from the New Yorker from last December that I just happened to be going through before getting rid of that old issue. And it begins like this. The article is called The Chosen Chip. And New Yorker, always being a bit ironic and a bit of humor, it is in their Brave New World department. Quote, the revelation that ChatGPT, the astonishing artificial intelligence chatbot, has been trained on a NVIDIA supercomputer spurred spurred one of the largest single-day gains in the stock market's history. When the NASDAQ opened on May 25th, 2023, NVIDIA's value increased by about $200 billion. A few months earlier, Jensen Huang, NVIDIA's CEO, had informed investors that NVIDIA had sold similar superconductors to 50 of America's largest companies. By the close of trading that day, NVIDIA was worth more than Walmart and ExxonMobil combined. I don't think any of us, certainly not myself, and unless one's an economist or deeply involved in this industry, that a statistic like this is even possible. It says something about the future history of the economy of the world. And, just remembering back X number of years when we first heard that term Google, what a cute, innocent word. I think also Microsoft, how unthreatening. Apple, just, it's all American, but these names are, they don't necessarily represent the impact of the forces behind them. But again, first hearing about Google as this search engine, and then it becoming a company and people investing in it, and all of a sudden, wait, what just happened in the world's economy? Your thoughts looking at this from the economic phenomena that it's creating, from your point of view in the work itself. This article for me was mind-blowing. I had no idea, or even a concept of an idea, that the value of this technology, and as it grows and expands, is nearly what it actually is.
Well, there's a lot to unpack in what you just said, but the thing that happened last week was that Microsoft announced that it's reactivating a nuclear plant so that it will have enough electricity to create the power that's needed to run AI. And yes, it definitely does take a lot of power, but newer chips are coming out that require less power and less resources. But I don't know where to even begin with that, Peter, because this is a gradual thing. NVIDIA didn't just pop up overnight.
Sure.
What popped up overnight and became available to the public was ChatGPT, but generative AI and the people who've been working in it for the last decade or two, are just looking at this as like the latest thing, not as a new thing. So, where is all of this going? Companies like JP Morgan, Bloomberg, I think the New York Times by this point are beginning to make their own large language models that only have that have all of their information from everything that anybody who works for their company would need to know and be able to reference immediately. It's perfect for employee training. It's perfect for anything that needs to be explained in depth. You can use it for that. The key thing that has to happen to make this more mainstream and more easily understood is for people to learn what it is and how it works. And, companies that are afraid of it are finding themselves behind the trend. And eventually they will either catch up or go away. I remember in one of my first jobs when I worked at Reuter and Finn, that's when desktop publishing came out, and when anybody could be a designer, your secretary could be a designer, and the most horrible designs resulted from that. I mean, so awful. And I remember the designers in the firm, the ones who chose to learn how to use the tools that were then available, which I think were InDesign and maybe Photoshop, I'm not sure back then. But the ones who didn't learn that had a new title, and that was unemployed, because you need to keep up with what's going on in your field. And this is going on in every field right now. So if you're not willing to learn the very basic aspects of it, you will indeed be behind what's going on around you. I'm not saying that you have to put the kind of time and effort into it that people who want to lead this movement are putting into it. But, if you work for any company at this point, AI can be helpful to you. And one of the things I do that I will say to it, I want to write a blog post about Peter Robbins' show. And I want to cover these topics. Can you please write me an outline? And boom, it writes me an outline. Then I go and I write my article, and then I go back to it and I say, give me the point of view of 3 experts in unrelated fields to critique what I've said. Have I left anything out? Is there another way that I could have looked at this? How's my sentence structure? How's my, and it will tell you. It will say, well, you could have explained this better. You could have explained that better. And then like I just did this recently with a very long thing that I was working on. How can I make this better? And I said, well, you've done pretty well, but here are a couple of things you should look at. And then when I was all done with it, I said, okay, now how is it? And it said, this is really well done. Good for you. And I said, great. Can you please give me a couple of headlines, and can you do the subheadings for me? And boom, it did them better than I would have done them. I mean,
and you're
but
a good writer.
But I'm just a human. I mean, I would have gotten to that point eventually. I can't say that I wouldn't. I would have rewritten and rewritten, because that's what you do, because you're a writer. But it just saves you so much time. It knocks at the very least an hour a day off my day. At the very least, by being able to have those kinds of interactions. If you are a student and your teachers are not teaching you how to use AI, they're doing a huge disservice to you, because you are going to need to learn it. You are going to need to use it, but it will get easier and easier, as more and more goes behind the curtain, as happened with Google and Microsoft and so on. And so it all becomes sort of second nature to have this kind of interaction. So, would I use it to write something? No way. But, to help me with my writing, for sure.
And I know you can understand, because we kind of came from the same background as far as revering great writers, that for many folks who are not technologically inclined, who are more of artistic temperament or see themselves as artists and writers, there seems something immoral or just elegiac or wrong or cheating about employing these services that are human created. There's a poignancy to it that I get, and I guess I see both sides of it, in part just some of the revelations of the things that you've been saying and explaining it in such plain terms of the things that it can do that in no way challenge or shortcut, human creativity, so to say. They're just tools. I guess maybe that's the word I'm looking for.
It's a tool.
Going back,
it really is. It's a very, very special kind of tool, but it's a tool.
A tool. Going back to some of the ideas that play across people's minds about not so much what could go wrong, but ways that it's going to come back at us. Well, what could go wrong? The idea of if we were to take our cameras into a big modern factory, whatever they're manufacturing, let's say automobiles, almost every step of the way is now absolutely automatized. It's kind of Henry Ford's dream come true beyond belief that, these components can go through, and with very little, if any, human invention, a car comes out the other side. Do you think, do you understand why some folks would be afraid that that kind of technology, of really taking it to the extreme, and you have a couple of people in charge of a huge factory making a lot of stuff that used to employ hundreds, if not thousands of people, would be intimidating, and why shouldn't they fear that?
You still need the human to do the quality check. You still need the human to have the idea for what the car is going to contain. You still need the human creativity to decide how it should look, how it should smell, how it should feel. All of those things are human ideas, and those are not going to go away. Is there something nefarious about that? I mean, there could be, but what has come? Another example. One of the people who I consider to be a mentor just went on a trip to Italy. He had ChatGPT do his entire itinerary, the hotels, the restaurants, the sightseeing, everything that he did on his 2 or 3 week trip was planned for him by AI, because he
Whoa.
said, these are my interests. These are, here's where I'm going to go, and, and give me these suggestions. Ultimately, it will be able to do tasks for you that take your time now. So the question becomes, okay, Ray Kurzweil wrote The Singularity quite a long time ago, and in it he said that we will reach a point where computers have absorbed all human knowledge. Well, okay, great. Then what are we going to do? Because so much of what are now jobs really won't function in the same way. So Sam Altman, who's the president or whatever he is of OpenAI, which runs ChatGPT, he's already got WorldCoin, because he's already looking ahead to universal basic income, because there will come a time when some of the jobs that now exist won't. And what will those people do? Will the retraining be there? Well, it hasn't been there so far. So, who's going to put it there? So, are there big changes ahead? Certainly. We're going to have robots that clean our house. I can't wait for that personally. I hope it can iron. But, and I'd like one that can cook, please. But, in the past, I had to marry one of those. But, hopefully my robot will do all that for me. But there are going to be robots that are going to, I don't know, maybe walk the dog. I don't really know if I would trust a robot to walk Lucy, but there are going to be things that will be done. We will have personal robots. I think Pi, that app, is pretty close. It's an AI companion already. It would be very easy to engage with it much more personally than most of us do. But there are definitely deep fakes that are coming out. There definitely is content being created that is not real, that certainly appears to be real, because not all people are good people. Are there going to be issues? There will.
As the world grows increasingly hostile, as nation states grow less trusting of each other and form tighter unions with others, as the world continues to move through this extended state of anxiety that we call history, how do you see AI as helping us to solve some of the immediate problems that we're dealing with right now? I read an article this morning in our local paper about this pristine area of central New York State here, where I'm based, and how Lake Cayuga, which is the largest of the so-called Finger Lakes, is now subject to more and more contaminants, and how some of the algae blooms that are starting to infect lakes around the country, or in many cases have done it already, attach themselves to microplastics, a new horrible discovery, and that they act kind of as a host and accelerate the process. Can you give me an example of how AI in the right hands might help to slow or stop or address some of these horrific, you know, environmental
Environmental.
concerns? Yeah,
I don't know how to answer that because I'm not a scientist, but
sure.
my guess is that you could use it to help create some formulas that might be able to be helpful. It writes code, by the way, that might be ask it to write some programs to analyze some of this information.
Hmm.
And perhaps, what I do find when I ask it questions like, what have I left out? What would somebody else's point of view be? That kind of thing. It gives me a next level of information. So perhaps by interacting with it with the right questions, which neither of us really have, perhaps it could be helpful in that regard. I don't know. I don't know if it, how long it will take before in the right hands it could do something like that, but probably right now, if you knew what you were doing.
Yeah,
I mean, this is like, for me, math and science were just like they were for you. Like, I really have to, when am I going to use this algebra stuff? I mean, did you ever? I never did. Trigonometry, I never did. But, but anyway, I got through school because I could write.
yeah.
And if you can write, you can get through anything. And, I mean, that's just the way it is. And I figured that out pretty early on. I think it was
Yeah.
sixth grade. When I realized that you didn't have to study, you just had to write. But, but I mean, where is it going and what will it be able to do?
Yeah.
I think it's limitless in the end effect. It depends on how it is trained and what kind of information it's given from which to extrapolate new information. But it does seem possible.
BL, going back to just defining basic terms, I mentioned in your introduction that you have experience in B2B and B2C, verticals from food to finance. What does that, the B's represent there?
Business to business and business to consumer. And,
I see.
I've promoted everything from the world's first singing wine bottle to, more erudite topics. I've had the good fortune to have interesting clients over the years and learn from them, and was able to be part of their success, which is really kind of cool. But let me give you another example. I was doing a pitch deck for a client, and I wanted to know, like, what is the correct number of slides to have in a pitch deck for raising money?
Huh.
How much content should I put on each one, and what areas must I cover? And it told me. And it told me, like, I have more slides than it said to have, but I always do. But, it was really helpful in that regard. It was just, to have that kind of basic information. And can you give me examples of some pitch decks that, helped companies that are now successful? Can you explain to me what was in their pitch deck? Can you give me a link to some of them? And yes, it can. The question is, what do you want to know? And then how would you normally, well, normal is the wrong word. How would you usually go about finding that information? Well, Google's not going to help you anymore because Google's just not deep enough. But there's stuff like, how do I spell something? Where do I find this? What is this? The best yoga
Sure.
studio in New York. Google still can maybe help you with that stuff, but you get much better help out of the AI.
Let's go back again. For so many of us, especially those that, you know, lack the technical knowledge, we know the basics. We can look things up online. We can email each other. We can, perform to some degree. But most of us, without thinking, like a marketing coup of, I think, the 1930s was that a paper tissue, became known as a Kleenex, which was a brand name. The same way in England, um, we would say vacuum a floor. They would say Hoover. I mean, talk about a brand name insinuating itself.
Frigidaire.
Yeah, there are these things. And for many of us, Google means search. Let's talk a bit more about Perplexity AI. I think for myself, as well as viewers and listeners and friends, I think a certain amount of rethinking at this point in our non-technological interfacing with our computers really needs to be looked at. And tell us what makes, again, Perplexity AI and platforms like it perhaps different than Google.
Well, Google is ad-based, and the various AI programs at this point in time are subscription-based, but there are free versions of all of them, and you can get pretty far with most of those. But one of the things that's happened as a result of Google not being the number one place to look for anything anymore is that what we all knew about search engine optimization no longer exists. And will you even need a website 2 years from now? I'm not sure. You want your information to be picked up into the large language model. Like I have asked it, what do you know about me? And it's come up with articles in which I mentioned I didn't even know about, but it would be interesting to ask that. Once you've interacted with it, it doesn't happen immediately, but I have no technical skills. I am the least technical person you're going to meet, and for me, this is a research tool. This is a learning tool. It's not, I don't use it for the technical aspect of it. So I can't tell you about the data sets and the coding and all that sort of stuff that you can do, because that's not what I do. What I do is marketing, and I write. And so I need it to help me booster those things. But there's plenty of people who are using it for data sets and for coding, and it's 1,000 times faster than any human coder, for example, and it makes less mistakes, and it can find its mistakes, from what I'm told. So it sounds scary, but in actual fact, once you start to use it, it's so much fun.
And again, Perplexity AI, is that we would just type that in? Perplexity AI is one word, or .ai, or
Perplexity.ai. If you go to my website, I have lots of instructional things on there, how to do this, how to do that. And I
great.
have a YouTube channel as well where I've done free webinars on the basics and that sort of thing. So, and I do, I consult to people, I teach people. I recently worked with a photographer, very, very talented photographer, who, like you said, I don't know anything about this. It's so intimidating to me, but I want to use it to write my social posts. How can I do that? And so I showed him. And, now he's on his own doing it. But, he didn't know what it might do, how to interact with it. So, it's something you can read about. There's videos, there's all kinds of courses that are free. Google has a free course. Microsoft has a free course that you can complete and get a certificate for completing. There's one from a writer named Shelley Palmer. Shelley's on TV a lot, and he's got a course, and his is free. I mean, there's many of these, but there are also an enormous number of people who are just trying to sell you something, and
Sure.
I try to avoid them. Like, I don't
Yeah,
want to know about your app. I don't want to know about all of this. I want to know, what can you do for me?
right.
And so you have to be careful, like, who you engage with, but that's the same as anything else
Sure.
online. And, if you wanted to learn about how to do your radio show, you had to learn that somewhere. And now you could find out in ChatGPT or Perplexity.
I was lucky. I learned from my producer, but the we're going to spend a few minutes at the end of the show going over what you can offer and connect with viewers and listeners on. At this point, do you know, I'm not asking you to predict the future, although I really like the personal robot idea. And again, thank you to listener and friend W.J. Smith, because he has, I'm sorry, W.J. Smith reminded us that it was Isaac Asimov who wrote I, Robot, and I stand corrected, as I should. The I, Robot robots, which, again, when I think of AI, it mixes with popular culture. But then again, I remember years ago wandering around the old Roman wall that surrounds the city of York, if you want a quick segue on that. And, your mind playing these wonderful images of things that have happened and coming to that rude, smashed-in opening where William Wallace and his men broke through and sacked part of the city. My first thought was Mel Gibson, which is not the way you want your mind wired necessarily in terms of understanding history. That said, do you think there's something around the corner, around the corner 6 months a year, that nobody's expecting that AI will be responsible for, that, like the advent of mobile phones was beyond a luxury and all of a sudden becomes part of the necessities of life?
I think AI is already part of the necessities of life, just a lot of people haven't caught up to its capabilities.
Yeah.
And I think that that will only increase. I mean, when you have Gmail offering to write your emails with AI, and by the way, it writes better ones than I do, much nicer ones than I do. I mean, I'll tell you, go, whatever, but it won't. It will find a polite way to do that. But I mean, when you have companies like Google and Microsoft and Meta, and they're trying to get you to interact with the tools that they have, that's only going to increase, and that's going to broaden the knowledge gap that is enormous. But we also need the media on board, and the media has to stop making this sound like it's the worst thing that ever happened. And are deep fakes horrible? They're absolutely horrible, but they're not new, and they're just better. And you can clone yourself, by the way. You can have, I could have had my clone show up to do this.
Next show, perhaps the three of us will do a show together. That would actually be really interesting, BL.
That would be fun. Yeah. But I mean, there are, are there dangers? Of course there are. But I think any technology in the wrong hands has danger. I don't think AI is the only dangerous thing that we're dealing with right now.
Sure, to put it mildly. Do you have any awareness whether or not AI, in a basic introductory sense, is making its way into public schools? I'm sure, of course, you can study at universities and colleges, but in lower education, are you aware of any move or programs more get based toward young people, or for high school, junior high school teachers, that kind of thing? Or is this something that still is kind of a bastard child of public school education as far as that goes?
I don't know where it is on the elementary school level, but I do know that from junior high school forward, it's very much a part of what is being taught. I mean, if you are going to be a good and effective teacher these days, then you better know enough about this to teach it. And I think that unless you are, right now, anybody can write anything, and it can be grammatically correct, and it can have information. It won't have the spark that humans have. So teachers can tell right away when something's been completely written by AI. The important role that they play is to help you understand how it can help you with your own creativity rather than to replace it. And that's what is the responsibility of schools. And some are doing better than others. And it took universities a while to get into this. It's really only in the past year or two at the most that I would say, the past year, that most universities are really starting to even get up to speed on, how to use it and to offer courses in it. You couldn't take courses until about a year and a half ago, most colleges.
Fascinating. Uh, I'm as you're speaking, I'm being a film lover really my whole life from the time I was young. The idea of early film making. Um, when we think of the pioneers, the great directors and producers, they were literally making it up as they went along. There were no rules. And now, of course, it's all codified and you can buy books on it and study it and take courses, but it's all happened so relatively fast in 100+ years, the whole history of film. I don't even think the most imaginative, technologically knowledgeable mind can imagine where, if we don't blow ourselves to hell, where we're going to find ourselves in 40 or 50 years relative to everything that we're talking about, or even a year and a half down the line, really.
I don't think we know at this point. I don't think anybody does. It's not like there are some people who know what's going to happen and the rest of us are going to learn it. I think everybody's just kind of learning as they go to the largest degree, including the companies that are out there right now. The other big leader is Claude, and they each have their own set of applications and a way of approaching things. And I just want to give you one example. Like
Please.
on Perplexity right now, you can make a company page. So if you wanted to make a page for your website about your show, you could go to Perplexity, you could put in information, about your show, and it would then write something based on the stuff that's on your website and so on. And it would also, you can change the headings. You can't change the copy that it writes, but once it writes the copy, it shows you the sources that it used. So then, I hope this isn't too in the weeds, but then you can go and eliminate the sources that you don't want. So for example, I did one about my site, and anything that wasn't a source from me, I took it out. And I changed the headings of the, so what that became was something that is an under the radar search engine optimization tool until Google figures out that we're doing it. And that's one of the things that it can be used for. So there are ways to use AI that will help you in Google. There are ways to use AI that'll help you in Facebook, and so on. And it's not something that you read an article about and you're ready to go. I mean, it's really something that you have to study. But I would highly, highly recommend reading the, what did I say it was called? Ethan Malick's book, Co-Intelligence.
Co-intelligence.
Co-intelligence,
And
because
the author's name again?
Ethan Malick, Mollack.
Okay.
And it was a New York Times bestseller. I wouldn't be surprised if it was still there, but it explains in really layman's terms, but that was one of those kind of books where at the end of it, I had yellow notes all over the place and pages outlined and all that kind of stuff, because it was like, oh, I see. Oh, I understand. But what he's talking about is testing different ways of going about it and of interacting with the software. And it's just incredible how the ways in which you ask make the results that you get better or worse. And so the thing that I would tell people to do when experimenting with it is just do what is called chain prompting. Ask it something, then ask it something about that. Then say, but what I meant was this, can you tell me about it in another way? That kind of thing. So you're talking to another brain. It's giving you another brain,
Incredible.
Basically you're getting an extra brain. And who couldn't use an extra brain?
Yeah. Again, there's concern in creative circles that it's simply going to be used to write novels, write newspaper articles, write scripts for films. I would imagine if it does, they'll be problematic in terms that they're going to be missing that je ne sais quoi that makes art in form of writing, of music, of film, of theater potentially, that it will miss that spark. Do you envision a point in the future where AI may be so good at auditing the human creativity gene, so to say, that at a certain point, oh my gosh, something is going to come out that's really good and had very little human involvement?
No, I don't think that's ever gonna happen. I really
Good.
don't. I don't think that that's in our future. I think
Interesting.
that the tools will get better. The
Yeah.
ways in which we approach them will get better. All of this will become more mainstream and people will understand more about it. But the only way to find out what it does is to go in there and play around with it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, you can have a free account on any of these as a trial. You just have to remember to keep a spreadsheet of what it's like your cable TV things. You have to keep a
Yeah.
spreadsheet of what you are on a free trial for so that you can
Yes.
cancel it before they charge you. But, pretty much everything has a free version. And, ChatGPT does, Perplexity does, Claude does, Microsoft's Gemini AI has a free trial. They all do, and the only way to really learn how to use it is to use it. It's like learning to do anything. You have to kind of start to do it.
For me, one of the sort of epiphanies of this show for me is doing a little rewiring on my own thinking. The term tool was not something I would have applied to AI because I was thinking about it as sort of this monolithic force in the universe only getting bigger and stronger on its own because it knows enough to grow on its own. Again, somewhat informed by the world of science fiction.
That's what I was
And that,
just going to say. That's a science fiction definition.
yeah, out of control, that there's a secret AI thing that's growing in the back room right now that's, ready to show us the door when it wants to. Um,
Maybe.
Well, again, my mind was affected by the 60s to one degree or another that I've never been able to fully compensate for. Um, it's the idea of, again, a tool. And I think of all the tools I've learned to use in my life, from the simplest to the more complicated, and, the most literal being in my 20s, making a good deal of my living in the Soho building boom as a framing carpenter and wallboard guy and doing demolition, which
You had
all
a
of us
great
done.
loft. You sure did.
Yeah, but doing so many other jobs in Soho where you have a raw space and you can recreate it. That wonderful little space I had in Chinatown for years, I was very proud of, having it looked like nothing like it was when I first saw it. But again, the idea of learning to use a tool, whether it's a power sander or a drill or a rotary saw, a handgun, a computer, they're tools. And I guess I just hadn't ever really thought of AI as a tool. That's major for me, and kind of humanizes it a bit, that it's at my service, even as,
I think it is at your service, essentially. But I mean, let's just go back. Like, architects used to have to do all their drawings and measurements by hand,
yeah,
and now they
sure.
have programs that basically speed that process up. Those are tools. Programs are tools, and so these are. I don't think that anybody knows the final definition of how we will use these tools, but right now they're unbelievably helpful if you do anything creative.
It's fascinating. Um, is there, how can I say, was there a moment for you where you realized that Well, in so many words, you could never trust what you were seeing. AI for me, again, as a film lover, was where it was most apparent when it got to a point where I realized with some wistfulness that I could never trust another still image or a moving image again. And for me, it happened in the Ziegfeld Theater in the East 50s, one of New York's premier theaters. And back in the day, I don't know how it is now, but the best sound system and the widest screen. You could sit up toward the front, even 20 rows back, and your peripheral vision
Yeah, it was
didn't.
great.
Yeah. And I don't know about you. I got to see Lawrence of Arabia there, 2001. But I'm remembering now when Jurassic Park premiered, I went to see it twice. I went to see it, and then I dragged my father, who I thought would be engaged by it as well. And there's this moment. It's where Sam Neill and Laura Dern are nursing, I think, the sick Triceratops. Perhaps it's got constipation or something. And all of a sudden, the John Williams score swells, and we look up. The camera angle goes up, and there are the brontosauruses. I swear, it didn't last more than a second. It probably didn't even last a second, but it was real while it lasted. And it was, holy shit. The secret of what I'm seeing here isn't that technology has come to this point. They found the island where the dinosaurs are still living. And then, of course, it's Peter Pan, and you wake up and you say, no, this is technology, but you can't ever you can't trust it again. It has gotten to a point where it can mimic reality so well in the moving image or in the still image that you need to remember this moment, because this is a little personal VC and AD for you. Was there a moment for you in any aspect of AI, even before maybe you became involved in it, that was the equivalent of what that moment was for me?
I would say yes, when I learned that I could make images from words, that it would translate, something that I said into realistic images, and I could tell it the style that I wanted. Do it in anime, do it in a pencil drawing, do it in whatever.
Okay.
I think that when I realized that that capability existed, that for me was an aha moment, because I have no skills as an artist. I have skills as a photographer, but not as an artist. And I think that being able to use those kinds of tools to create what looks a hell of a lot like art was a real major moment for me. And right now, I'm not sure I would want to be a graphic designer.
Ooh,
I'm not sure I would. I mean,
good point.
there's a good enough, and then that's what a lot of people call this. It's good enough. Well, it's not good enough. It's not perfect. And so a graphic designer is going to bring a different point of view than the AI is going to bring, but what the AI is going to do is probably good enough for most uses. So, do you want the best? Yes. Can you afford it? Probably not. But, it's, are people losing their jobs as writers? Yes, they are. But what I've been hearing is that companies are finding that doesn't really work out, and they really need those people back. Maybe they don't need 10 of them, maybe they need 6 of them, but they still need human creativity. Is that going to go away? I don't think so.
Yeah. You're allowing me to arrive at some tentative conclusions that I would not have without this conversation. And innately, I think you're probably right the way it's going to work out. There is something about us relative to the world we're talking about and how it's advancing into the future, where we're not going to ever be able to remove ourselves from the pictures that we're talking about: creativity, business, industry, etc. We can minimalize it, and that dream of retraining people to do different things. But right now, of course, with so much of our preoccupation to war zones, to areas where nature and human behavior have kind of conspired in a way to create changes in our environment. Some say they're just cycles that go on, but there's no way we can separate ourselves and the amount of carbon, among other things, that we pumped into the air since the Industrial Revolution and activity here on Earth. Do you see a role for AI in helping us address these dramatic problems? I was back and forth yesterday and the last few days with friends in Roswell, New Mexico, a location famous for the
Something
obvious.
bad happened there, right?
Tremendous flooding.
But
Flooding that shocked me. I've visited Roswell, I'm sure, 6 or 7 times. And yeah, it can rain, but it's not the way we think of it. It was kind of 100-year flood. I mean, again, I know these streets to some degree, and seeing, cars just floating by, and knowing deaths have happened and a tremendous amount of property damage and properties that I know. Do you see a role for AI, because we sure need it, in helping us address some of these problems that are coming on us, not just in terms of nature or human exacerbation of a situation that isn't being helped by our activity, and even in the political climate where war and more people killing more people seems imminent? Do you see a role for AI in either of these areas, and how might it come to pass that artificial intelligence could help us manage this age-old problem of man? And I say mankind because it's not something I see as being created by women innately, just of war and mutual aggression, as well as our growing environmental problems. There's 2 simple problems to toss into you.
Well, none of that is simple, but it's the way that we can use AI, is going to come down to the questions that we ask it. I don't know enough about weather forecasting to know whether there would be a way to get earlier warnings, or I'm guessing that there might be, and that AI might be helpful in that regard. But can it solve mankind's problems? I seriously don't think so. I think that's going to be on us, but I think we're going to be able to ask it for help. I think that once we have an idea, we might be able to ask it, like, how to execute this idea. Will it come up with its own ideas? I seriously doubt that, at least not at this point in time. Is that possible in the future? It will depend largely on what's fed into it. And, that's an open subject right now, because the New York Times just told ChatGPT, you can't crawl our site, which was a stupid decision on their part, by the way, but they said that. And other news media say, please do crawl our site. We want our information to come up in search results. I want the stuff I write to come up in search results, and sometimes it does in ChatGPT or Perplexity, because I've put a lot into it. So the tools on their own are not making the ideas; they're facilitating the making of ideas. They're helping to create ways to act them out, perhaps. But right now, can we solve the problems of war and peace and environment and the political mess that we're in? No, not yet, if ever.
I want to go back to my introduction as we come into the final part of the show, and then go into what you can offer folks, what is available on your website, and how they can get in touch with you. Cutting through hype and hyperbole at What's Next Tech. BL teaches non-technical clients how to incorporate generative AI into their workflow in ways that were unimaginable even 6 months ago. With group workshops and one-to-one training, she will help get you up to speed with AI. So let's talk about what people can find at What's Next Tech. And that would be what'snexttech.ai, not .com, correct?
Correct. Yeah. You can have dot whatever you want these days, but what you'll find there are blog posts that I've written about how to use the technology. Um, Information. There are. I have a YouTube channel for What's Next Tech, and it has videos of some of the free workshops that I've done. I I work I've worked with agencies and brands, and I've also worked with artists and writers, a lot with writers, because they really need a lot of help in getting their books done, and
Yes.
this is a way that can help them get it organized. Um, you know, I spent the majority of the time in those workshops saying, "Do not use it to write your book." And, and they're all like, "Well, that's what I thought I was gonna do." Well, no, not unless you want a really lousy book. So, what's available there is some basic information and, links to other articles and so on. And, there are some newsletters that I would recommend that people read. Um, I get way too many of them, but there's one called Ben's Bites. There's one called Superhuman that I think if you read those two on a regular basis, you would learn a lot. And there's an incredible newsletter that I follow, a Substack newsletter called Wonder Tools.
Hmm.
And Wonder Tools is all about, how to use all of these things. And he demonstrates them and he explains how he uses them and, how he queries them and what's in his toolbox and that sort of thing. So, that's well worth subscribing to. It's called Wonder Tools on Substack. It's by Jeremy Kaplan, who's just extraordinary as a teacher. He runs the journalism program at City University.
Oh, boy.
And yeah, I mean, he's really just brilliant. He was at Columbia. Ben's Bites, Wonder Tools, and Superhuman, and you're in. And subscribe to my newsletter because I write newsletter too.
And what is your newsletter called?
What's Next Tech newsletter.
Oh, that's it. Okay. Again, folks can simply go to What's Next Tech, one word, .ai, and begin to audit and learn from what you're doing and contact you directly if they're interested in having you train them or company members. You offer, again, individual and workshop situations. Is there, as we head out, is there one example you can give us of working with a company or a small group that really turned them around or changed their profile or the way that they approach what they do once they kind of got their hands on the tools and learned how to use them?
Well, definitely the writers' workshops that I've done, people have come to me afterwards and said, I really had no idea how to approach this. I really didn't know what to do. And I've just explained like the top 3 things that it can do for you. And writing is not one of them. And so, people have come back to me after the workshops and said, wow, that really opened my eyes. Excuse me. And I think it helps. I'm not. I need to be shown things. I'm not like a book learner. I would go to a video before I would go to an article to learn how to do something. And then if you're like that, then I'm helpful to you. I'll give you stuff to read if you want stuff to read. But for me, it's just helpful. Like, this is how you do this. This is how you would do that. What's your question? Let me show you how you would answer it. And,
Hmm.
that's what I bring to the table. And, for me, this is big fun.
That's wonderful. And what a journey in terms of learning and teaching you have been on, my friend.
Yeah, I've been around for a long time. I'm an internet old timer. There's actually a group called Internet Old Timers, of which I am a member. And those are people who've been doing this for a really long time, many of whom are retired, but I don't ever plan to retire, really.
I'm with you, even if I could. We're too engaged in the things that we do to want to lay them aside easily.
Well, and what you do is so fascinating, Peter. I mean, I think that given your expertise in the field of, the unknown and what is known, people, you need a wider audience. You really do. And, I think like we have a mutual admiration thing going on here because we've both stuck with what we're doing for all these years because it's enjoyable to learn.
Yeah, it is. And on that note, this has been an amazing 2 hours, and I think not just for me. It's wonderful to see you, my dear friend, and we will continue to stay in regular contact, even if with hiccups along for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
I would look forward to having you return as a guest sometime in the new year, possibly as part of a panel discussion.
Oh, that'd be
And
great.
yeah, let's do a little brainstorming on that. But in the meantime, a giant hug to you, a coochie coo to your cute little dog, and may the beautiful weather continue and life go on relatively trouble-free.
We can only hope. Thank you,
Uh,
Peter. This has really been interesting for me.
my pleasure, my dear
Hearing
friend.
your questions, it really just explains to me what's been missing in some of the ways that I've explained things. And, I have friends who can't do a BCC in an email, despite my making videos for them and demonstrating it in their houses and all of that. And those are people who don't really care to learn the new. I can't get into that. That's, you know,
Yeah.
I don't think either of us will ever say that. I doubt that people who follow either of us will ever say that. And, that's what makes this fun.
Amen. Peter Robbins here, my special guest this evening, B.L. Ochman. Stay well, stand up for what you believe in, and we'll see you next week. Until then.